Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the 9 to 5 Faith podcast. I'm here with my new friend, Ashley. Ashley, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thank you for having me.
Yes, and I love the color coordination that you have going on with like the red room, the red lip, the red earrings, and the red top. It's very much on point.
I have a problem with that color. Yeah.
I wish I had a problem with that color. It is like I always get compliments when I wear it, but I also like don't own anything in the color red. So need to expand that wardrobe. So tell our listeners a little bit about yourself and who you are and what you do and all that good stuff.
Sure, absolutely. So my name is Ashley, and I am from Clinton, Mississippi. So if you're any type of familiar with Mississippi, it's basically right outside of Jackson. I'm a professor at the University of Southern Mississippi in the education department. So I essentially teach pre-service teachers. So our students who are going in to be teachers, I teach them how to teach reading and writing and assessment to elementary students. My husband and I are both educators. He teaches also as at Mississippi College, which is a Christian university here in Clinton. Totally different. He teaches anatomy and physiology and biology. So vastly different scales. He's
Yeah.
a little bit smarter than me, but we're not going to tell him I said that. Um, yes, and so we were blessed with two beautiful boys, Jaden and Jordan. Jaden is 15, and kind of the story that I think is going to progress a little bit today during this session is we actually lost Jordan last year, and so he was 12 when that accident happened, and so that's a big part of why I jumped into writing and researching and
Yeah.
blogging and things like that.
Yeah. Well, I'm so sorry to hear that, but yeah, we'll definitely kind of dig into that as you feel comfortable. But that's really exciting too. So your husband and you work at different colleges. Are they near each other?
Oh no. So he actually works about 5 minutes from our house, which is very convenient for him. I have an hour and a half commute.
Yeah, that's
Yes.
rough. I saw you put that in our notes
Mhm.
and that is rough. How often do you have to go into the office?
It really depends on the semester. My
Okay.
yeah, so one semester I was totally online, so I just could go pop in and out whenever I wanted to. Last semester I had two in-person classes, and this coming
Okay.
semester I have three in-person classes. So I will have to drive Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursdays to go down and teach. So it really just depends on the classes that need to be taught.
Yeah. Yeah,
Mhm.
and nothing about like the South. My mom lives in Georgia and she commutes a pretty long commute. Y'all's roads drive me absolutely nuts.
They're not great.
I
And
haven't been to
so
Mississippi, but if they're anything like Georgia's or like South Carolina's, ooh, they're interesting.
it does present a challenge. So
Yeah.
I actually, again, if you're familiar with anything with Mississippi, I drive all the way down 49, Highway 49. And I mean, it's a straight shot, so it's great.
Okay.
There's stop signs or stoplights, every few
Right.
miles of the highway. And then they have been working on parts of 49 for it seems like the entire lifespan of my driving career. So it's, I mean, it just kind of is what it is.
Oh my goodness. See, I live in Phoenix, and the good thing about Phoenix is that everything out here is pretty much new. So, like, I mean, except like the old freeways, all the freeways are new. So, like, technically there shouldn't have to be a ton of work on them. Never seems to be that way. But yeah, we're on a grid system. And I mean, y'all are not.
No, we are not.
we we always joke. So where I live, everything is grids and loops. So like the freeways, they kind of are like boxy and they go in a circle and you
Mhm.
can get from point A to point B. And all of the like neighborhoods, since they're all so new, they're all grid system neighborhoods. And in my town, there is we call it like the drunken road because it's just a diagonal that like cuts through the entire middle of the town and it like disrupts the grid. And so like we have two roads with the same name that go different directions and then they end up meeting somewhere. And so always keeps it lively. But I give props to my friends in the South because I could not deal. I need to add that to my checklist of why I'm not moving to the South. It's humidity, bugs, and now number 3 is going to be the roads.
The roads, yeah, the humidity is pretty bad today. It was 100% yesterday. It was
Oh
98 with
no.
100% humidity. And it was supposed to rain and it never did. So
That's awful. Well,
Mhm.
here it's just hot, so we don't have to deal with any of that, and I'm glad for it. So, how long have you been working in this role?
So, as a professor, this is actually only my second year. Before that,
Okay.
I worked at the Mississippi Department of Education
Okay.
as the English Language Arts Director, which I also had to drive all around the state.
Yeah.
So, the commute that is an hour and a half um, one way really is not terrible for me
Mm,
because honestly, for the past 6 years, I have been driving all over our state. Luckily, I am centrally located. So, generally speaking, I don't have to drive more than 3 hours one way, but commuting has
gotcha.
definitely been something that has been a part of my life for a while.
Yeah. Yeah, and in this entire time, I always like to ask like where your job kind of intersected with your faith journey and like have you always been a Christian as long as you've kind of been in the workforce or how did those timelines kind of align together?
So, that's actually one of my favorite stories to tell here lately. So, I'm really
Okay.
glad you asked.
Yes.
Um, so yes, I have always been a Christian. My father is a pastor, so I've been raised in the church. Obviously, there was a time in life where I wasn't as close to God as I am now, and kind of those ebbs and flows as a young adult, getting into adulthood. But as far as my position now, it's a little bit different because it is a public university, and so they have pretty strict, policies and procedures in regards to sharing faith and just general things like that.
Yeah.
Like I said, whereas my husband teaches at a Christian university, and so like they are encouraged to pray before class and to have Bible studies and things of that nature. So it is
Right.
vastly different.
Yeah.
But the story of how I actually got the position that I have now, so as I said, my son had passed away, and I was traveling all over the place, commuting, going throughout the state to do professional development for teachers and coaching teachers and just basically anything that teachers needed across the state. And so again, travel every single day. Um, every Monday, not last year, but the year before, I drove 3 hours one way to almost Tennessee. And
Mm,
so, again, it was a lot. And after we lost our son, obviously priorities and things shifted a good bit. And I was very concerned about going back into that role because I took about 3 months off. And,
yeah.
but I was very concerned about going back into that role and just being gone so much and traveling so much. And because, again, we do have a 15-year-old home and
Right.
things of that nature. And so obviously it was something that we were all praying about. And, but I honestly wasn't really looking for anything because, again, I didn't want to have like a huge change
Right.
right after something like that happened. And so I had talked to my boss, and we were kind of making plans and ideas and things like that. And legitimately, the week before school started, the University of Southern Mississippi called me,
Mm,
and I had applied to teach adjunct there probably 3 years ago,
right.
and nothing came of it. And I guess they just kept my application on file. So they needed someone to teach a very specific phonics and phonemic awareness course that you have to have a master's degree in reading or reading education to be able to teach.
Okay.
And I was literally the only person
Wow.
that had that degree that could teach that. And so they called and, they were like, hey, we want you to apply for this. It was a full-time position. And so honestly, I told them, I said, no, I told them what had happened. And I said, that's just a big change right now. I'm a little nervous about that. And, they said, okay, we understand, but we just want to send you like the benefits and things that you would have here.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, sure. So they sent the benefits, and of course, you're looking at all these benefits and at a state school, and you're like, oh well, these are nice.
Yeah.
The schedule's obviously very nice, that type of thing. And so I did go ahead and apply, and they called me immediately and said they wanted me to come,
Right.
but it was a pretty big pay cut. And
Mm.
so again was like, I don't think I can do that right now. This is a big
Right.
pay cut. But the pay was set, and so they basically were like, well, what can we do to make you say yes?
Mm.
And so I said, well, I don't want to have to drive, every day, like
Yeah.
2 or 3 times a week would probably be my max. And they were like, okay, done. And so it was, again, very much a God thing. Totally just landed that in my lap, and it was desperately needed at that time, because that was the semester that I had all online classes.
Mm.
So I didn't have to get up and go into the office like after this, traumatic event had just happened, and I was able to
Right.
be at home and to kind of process things and work through things and be here for my family. So that is how I got to where I am now, which is,
Yeah.
like I said, I mean, it's one of my favorite stories because all throughout my life, I have so desperately tried to manipulate and control
Mm.
my destiny or my purpose and
Right.
where I want to be and what I want to do. And it was just a perfect example of I could not have orchestrated that better. And
Yeah.
so, God totally took care of everything. And again, it's perfect. I mean, I
Mm.
literally could not have done it better.
Oh, I love that. And yeah, I think I'm actually working on a few writing pieces right now where I'm like, if you try to dream up the best thing that you could
Hmm.
possibly dream of, you're short shooting yourself because
Yeah.
God has like his plan is so much far superior than what we could ever even try to dream up for ourselves. So that's really beautiful that that has like played out, especially in like in your role and your transition, especially in the midst of like some really terrible like instances and situations and all that stuff. So, my big question, because I used to commute 40 miles one way.
Okay.
I it was quite the trek, it was quite the journey, and that drove me nuts. I like was desperately needing to get out of that job. But I also think like part of it was the job as well. But how do you
Hmm.
handle it? How do you deal with it? How do you survive, keep yourself sane, anything like that. If anyone's listening who has like a terrible commute or like a really long commute or it's just really far, they understand. So,
Yes.
how what are your kind of tricks of the trade to keep yourself level-headed throughout it?
So there are several things that I do, and I will say too, I am in the minority here because I actually love to drive.
Okay.
I love to drive. I love that quiet time that I get
Mm,
driving by myself in the car. And plus, I've done it for so long, it does not bother me to be in
okay.
the car and drive that long.
Okay.
But with that being said, especially if I, because like I said before, this position where I'm now only driving an hour and a half, which sounds long to people who don't have a commute. To me, I'm like, oh, that's nothing. Um, so what I essentially would do is I kind of have like I don't want to say a schedule, but I have like a flow of
Yeah.
things that I do. And so I always start off with listening to my favorite Pandora station is Hillsong Radio. And
Okay.
so I always start off with listening to that Hillsong Radio for about 20 minutes just to kind of, get into the flow of my commute.
Yeah.
Um, After that, kind of depending on my feeling, I typically will pray for a little while. And that's when I find that I actually have the best prayer times
Mm,
um, in the car by myself. I don't know if it's because I'm not as distracted, as I am at home, or things like that. But it just really listening to that music just really kind of gets me into that mindset of, worshiping God and being close to God. And then, like I said, generally have a pretty good prayer time. And then I typically either will listen to my Bible app just to kind of make sure I'm getting that in. I hate to say this, but I have a love hate relationship with that, to be honest with you. Like, I love that I have that option
Right.
to have that Bible app and listen to it. But I'm the kind of person who I like to study the
Right.
verses. I like to write them out. I like to make notes and annotations. And so obviously when I'm driving, I cannot do that.
Right.
Um, so I do again like to have that option, but that's not something that I guess rely on, so to speak. And so, like I said, depending on depending on where I'm going and what I'm doing, sometimes I'll listen to a podcast. Um, I do listen to like Proverbs 31's podcast that they have. Francis Chan is another podcast that I enjoy listening to.
Yeah.
I'm a huge Enneagram fan, and so there's a couple Enneagram podcasts that I'll listen
Yeah.
to as well.
What's your number?
I'm an 8.
Okay. Beautiful.
What are you?
I'm a 6.
Okay,
A
good.
hard 6.
Yeah, I'm a pretty heavy 8, and
Yeah.
sometimes it makes life difficult, but
Yeah.
it
Okay.
is.
Yeah. Let's go.
So anyway, podcast, and then generally speaking, like if I have any phone calls or anything I need to make before I go somewhere, like I'll try to, kind of get those things finished and wrapped up. And then I do try to always, about 15, 20 minutes before I get to my location, go back and listen to music that is uplifting and
Hmm.
something that's going to help me go into where I am calm and
Mm.
like trying to just kind of get that day started and on a
Yeah.
positive note.
Yeah.
um so I try to make my morning commutes as calm and just as worshipful, and really kind of start my day with God.
Yeah.
So I find that when I have that commute time, I'm able to spend so much more uninterrupted
Yeah.
time with God than I do like if like this summer. I mean, I haven't been going to the office because it's summertime and no one's there. And so that's been something that I've had to work on, not traveling and
That's
doing
so
that.
interesting. That's so
Mhm.
interesting because I feel like a lot of people too would, use their commute or not count their commute, right? Like, not that we're keeping score, but not
Mhm.
consider that like the time that they're spent in the car commuting and everything as part of that, sacred time with Jesus. But it's really beautiful that you've found a way to kind of like make it your own little mini church service.
It was definitely trial and error, because I will say for a long time, because I'm not a morning person. And so for a long time, I would, yeah, I would get in the car and I'll just be honest. I have my guilty pleasure is gangster rap music.
I love it.
I absolutely love Snoop Dogg.
Okay.
Like, okay, all those things. So, but for a while, like I would get in the car and think like, oh, I need to wake myself up. So I'm going to listen to like some really upbeat, music.
Yeah.
And, by the time I got to work, I mean, I'm like, like, oh my God. And so I just discovered that that was not what I needed to do, to
Right.
go into to work and be the person I needed to be at work, if that
Yeah.
makes sense.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And I think too, like, you just have to figure out, like, for me, I was just angry because I'm a California born person. So I have California road rage. And driving just made it come out. And also, I give props to you that you pray during your commutes because I always found like when I would pray during my commute, I'd end up crying and then I'm like driving and crying, and that's just never a good situation.
Mhm.
So I give like props to you that you're able to balance that because I
I
could
do
not.
have to be careful with that. If I feel myself getting too emotional, I will kind of change what I'm doing, because obviously, yes, you don't want to go into work with like puppy eyes and red eyes and like people like, oh no, what happened? What happened?
Just talking to Jesus.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really powerful. One thing too that I found when I was commuting, now I'm not, I'm working from home. You can tell by my very messy office that I spend all my time in here. Um, But when I was commuting, one thing I'd love to do is make phone calls. So I would call my mom one day, I would call my grandma the another day, call my other grandma another day, just
Mhm.
make phone calls. So like I'm intentionally reaching out to these people and like having conversations. Also, phone calls trump text messages
Yes.
anytime in my book. So I always love to just be on phone calls and like I had just these really dear moments with my grandma
Mhm.
before she passed of just talking on the phone with her all the
Yep.
time.
I love that.
Yeah.
I typically save that for my ride home.
Okay.
Yeah, so, like, my ride home is not as worshipful because I just I mean, at that point, I'm just kinda ready to get home.
Yeah.
And, but I do spend the time at my phone calls and things, and I actually one of the things that I do just because I'm so all over the place in my calendar, if someone, tells me something I still keep a paper calendar. I'm a paper calendar girl. I
Me
have it
too.
online as well, but I like my paper calendar. So I will actually like, let's say you told me like, "Oh, my mom is having surgery on this day." Like, I always have my calendar with me and I write it down.
Mm,
And so my calendar's always open at work or wherever I am. And so I'll see that, and that's kind of how I try to intentionally make those connections.
mm,
And I do have the time to do that on my commute home
yeah.
because I don't know about you, but once you get home, everything you have kids that have homework, you have to cook dinner, you have to
Right.
kind of start doing things like that. And so on my commute is when I again can be very intentional about reaching out to people and making those connections. And then again
Hmm.
with my calendar, doing that to be very purposeful
Yeah.
because I don't know about you, but I know if I don't write it down, it'll be in one ear and out the other. And
Yeah.
not that I don't care, but it's just we're so busy and got so
Yeah.
many things going on that if I don't write it down immediately, it's not going to happen.
Yeah. I always say if it doesn't exist on a list, it doesn't exist in my head,
Yes.
because I'm the same way where I have to have it written down. And I'm starting to do some research for one of my books, and I'm like, I need to figure out a physical way to like put this research together because if I can't see it and touch it, I don't want to have to scroll to find it. Like that's just
Yes.
who I am. Now, one thing that I did when I was commuting was, I would always also call my husband. And so we use that time as kind of like a decompression, like the small talk that you would have like when you get home, we
Hmm.
have on the phone. And so like when I get home, we're able to just kind of like carry on through our life. Have you like do you do anything like that with your husband or with your son or anything like that?
No, but that's a really good idea. Um, because it is. I mean, it's hard. Like I said, when you get home, it's like you have all these things to do, and so we might say, "Oh, like how was your day?" But at the same time, like I'm cooking, so I'm not really focused on telling you about
Right.
my day. Um, so no, actually, I don't do that. I probably should, to be honest with you. And I like that you actually even suggested that.
Yeah.
I will say with our son, he's a sophomore in high school, and he's just like most high school students, is so busy and so just wrapped up with everything that our time together is, generally speaking, when we are getting ready for bed. So,
Mm,
like when at a certain time we're like, okay, phones are getting put up, everything's because we don't let him keep his phone in his room
yeah.
on school nights, and so phones are getting put up, and I go in there and we just kind of chat, and I have found that that's our time to really kind of like you said, decompress and kind of talk about the things throughout the day. And because he's then had time to come home, do his homework. He
Yeah.
has practice for he's in show choir, and so he has practice for show choir. And so all that's done, and that's finally a time where he can kind of relax, and so that's the time
Yeah.
that we found that is best for us.
Yeah.
um I'll just be honest with you, ever since the accident, my husband and I have had a hard time
Mm,
finding that connection time.
yeah.
um just because everything going on, all the emotions, all the
Yeah.
whatever. And so that is something that since our son passed, that we have
Yeah.
had struggles with. And so I
Yeah.
actually really like that you suggested calling him
There we go.
and chatting. I
Yeah.
probably really needed to hear that. I
Oh,
appreciate
oh, I love that. Yeah, and sometimes it's just like awkward being awkward and like we would sit on the phone just in silence and I'd be driving and then if something popped into my head, I would say it and then he would be like, "Yeah, yeah, okay." And then I could tell if he was like busy doing something and be like, "Okay,
Yes.
like let me finish my
Mhm.
podcast and I'll see you when I get home." But yeah, it was a really great way to kind of decompress. Um Shifting gears a little bit and I want to talk more about this really horrendous thing that you have gone through and I want to talk about like a good segue into it would be like how were you able to handle that and like be drawing appropriate boundaries with your work as well. So you can start from the beginning and telling that, but really,
Okay.
like, I'm just curious, like,
Uh-huh.
something hard is happening on the home front, like
Mhm.
how can we, set aside the appropriate amount of time to make sure we're taking care of our families and ourselves, but also like reporting to work because we still have that responsibility.
Yes. And I will say, so again, all of us are in the education realm in our family, and so the accident that took his life happened in June, and so we did have the entire month of July and half of August to kind of process some of that.
Yeah.
So it wasn't like we had to, immediately go back to work, which was a huge blessing.
Right.
And we've talked about it too, like, I don't know how somebody loses someone and then they go back to work in 2 weeks.
Yeah.
It Because I mean, to this day, someone will say something about something that happened in September of that year, and I'm like, I have no recollection of
Yeah.
that. And so it's that was a big thing. The fact that we did have that time, that we didn't, have to immediately go back to work.
Yeah.
Um, all of our Like I said, I started a new job, and I was very open and upfront with them from the beginning, and they were very accommodating.
Mm.
Like, I'm sure that's why I had all online classes that semester,
Right.
which again just worked out, and it was phenomenal.
Yeah.
My husband teaching where he's been there for 15 years. They point blank ask him, like, what are you comfortable teaching? Like, do you need to teach later on in the day? Like, was again very accommodating with the schedule.
Mm.
Our son was a freshman last year, and even the school system was just so amazing with everything that they did. I mean, they reached out during the summer and said, "Hey, we do have counselors at the school. If he wants to talk to somebody, he's more than welcome to. If he just wants to leave class and talk to somebody, just the teacher knows about it." I mean, so everyone was
Yeah.
extremely like, I guess our community was
Mm.
extremely supportive.
Yeah.
And that was something that I have said over and over again, was if we did not have our faith in God and we did not have the community that we had, I don't think we would have made that.
Right.
Um and so it's so important, and that is something that I've really stressed to people since then, is finding your people.
Mhm.
Um, and of course, it's just one of those things, like, you really never know who you have until something happens,
Yeah. Yeah.
And so there are people who,
For better
we,
or for worse.
yeah. And so there were definitely people who, we thought would have been, or like people you think would be super supportive and super there for people, and then they weren't. And then
Mhm.
some people that you don't expect to be like that really came through.
Right.
Um, but definitely, obviously, our faith in God was number one, because from the get go, we said, obviously, it was a horrific event, a tragic accident. Like, he wasn't sick or anything. I mean, it was a tragic accident, and it was a freak accident. And but again, like, we know that we serve a sovereign God,
Yeah.
and we don't like it. We still don't like it. We're still, we have, sometimes we're angry, sometimes we're sad, sometimes, we're just depressed. So many different emotions go with grief. But at the end of the day, I know that there's a purpose behind it. I
Mhm.
may never know that purpose um, on this side of heaven, but I know there's a purpose.
Mm.
And that helps me um, just kind of processing through that, if that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah,
Because it is something that's so, like, yes, I'm angry. Like, I lost my baby. I mean,
yeah,
I've gone through the whole, this isn't fair. Why did this happen to us? Like,
yeah,
all of those processes and thoughts. And I'll be honest, like, there was a time um, when, especially the first like 2 months, like, yes, I prayed, but my prayers were obviously drastically different
yeah.
than like they are today or they were beforehand. And I point blank told God, um, I took a lot from Job because
Yeah.
he was very, like, he told God that he was not
Yeah,
happy and he was not pleased about this, and I did
yeah,
like that. There were several times where my prayer was, God, this is BS,
yeah,
you know, but I'm gonna trust you, and I need you, and help us to help our anger and our resentment and all these things not get in the way of what you're doing.
yeah.
And that was really hard. But again, I don't want whatever the purpose is of this, I don't want me to get in the way of that.
Mm, yeah.
Um, but yeah, so definitely our faith in God and our community. Like I said,
Mm,
if we did not have those two things, we would not have made it. And
yeah.
I mean, even just little things like our neighbors cut our grass the entire summer.
Mm,
Like, we didn't ask people. Like, we would
yeah.
just wake up and it would be cut. Um, like, people, again, like, our son is in show choir, and so we have to pay for that. It was paid for. Like, someone
Mm,
paid for it.
yeah.
Um, just not having people that were so there for us that we didn't have to worry about, like, the little
Yeah.
minute things that you don't think about.
Yeah.
Was honestly, I hate to say life changing, but at the same time, like, I don't think we would be where we are today if we didn't
Mm,
have that.
yeah. Absolutely. And I think too, like one of the things that I was thinking of, like when you were saying all of this, and I think that, I mean, so many thoughts. The first thing being when hard things happen, and some people believe that, when you follow Christ, bad things don't happen. Okay,
Hmm.
they do. That's not true. Bad things happen to everyone, but I think I heard it put once that it's the hope that we're able to carry through the bad things
Hmm.
that differentiates the experience. So, as a Christian, yes, bad things are going to happen, hard things are going to happen, but it's the hope that we get to carry because we have faith in Jesus. It's the hope that we get to carry through it that is the game changer in all of it.
One thing that really helped me too is, so right after the accident happened, a lot of friends really pushed us to go to counseling, which
Yeah.
I, strongly recommend, especially if something that traumatic happens. Um, and so we started going, and our therapist's first initial suggestion was we'll start journaling. Um, and so my husband literally came home and would write down, like, today this person brought us dinner. Today this person did this.
Mm,
And as I was doing that, that did not help me. That just kind of, my thinking process was, I don't want to relive my crappy day,
yeah.
writing it in a journal.
Right.
So, and again, the research side of me, because I'm a professor, I had all these questions, that I was questioning God, questioning his purpose, questioning all these things. And so I went from an in a research aspect.
Mm,
And so I started researching, and I got all these books on grief and all these books on loss that were Christian based, and
yeah.
read through the Bible. And so my questions began being like a research topic for me, and
Yeah.
really trying to process through that. And So during that time, I wrote a book about the situation.
Mm,
And it starts off, with the story of what happened. And then essentially, because like you said, we do always think, oh, I'm a Christian, this shouldn't happen to me, or oh, I was a good mom, so why did this happen to me and not somebody else? And again, just all those questions.
right.
Um, and so taking that and really looking at, what does God promise us? God, there's so many promises that God promises in the Bible. And one of them is not that we will have an easy life, you
Right.
know. Um, and so really that's how I research that. So I researched God's
Mm,
promises and put that in the book, and then tried to make it more applicable, ending it with, so if you know somebody who is grieving, like these are the things you can do, or if you are
yeah.
grieving, these are some things that might help you. So I'm really excited about that. It's actually at an editor right now. And so fingers
That's
crossed,
so exciting.
like I'm hoping like October, November-ish that can
That's so
come out.
exciting. Yes. Well, maybe I'll hold back on this episode and just hang out on it so we can get it released right around the times that your book comes out. So fingers
Awesome.
crossed. Um, I think my other thing that I am kind of drawing in on all this is what we were saying earlier, where, people's true colors kind of come out
Hmm.
in the midst of this. And I actually think I would argue that, of course, there's the bad apples in terms of like the workplace and the schools and all that stuff. Like that stuff exists. But my hunch is to argue that more times than not, the schools and like the kind of bigger powers that be, meaning, if you have kids, it's the school. And, if you're in the workplace, then it's kind of, your HR and your bosses and everything like that. I would say more times than not, they step up. And I think that it's not seen. And so, they might not get that credit where it's due.
Hmm.
But yeah, that's my hunch is that more times people show up in really powerful ways like they did in your
Hmm.
situation, um, versus just like being, kind of flippant and just putting it to the side and being like, "Oh, well," like, you know.
And I would totally agree with that. But I think that, and one of the big things I talk about in my book is that we don't talk about grief. We
Yeah.
don't talk about loss because it makes us so uncomfortable.
Mhm.
And I totally get that. Before the accident, I mean, if someone was crying, I would legitimately be like, let me pat you on the back and be like, oh, I'm so sorry. Are you okay?
Yeah.
Just because that emotion, a lot of people, they just get so uncomfortable. And so
Yeah.
one of the biggest things that I know we have tried to do is to not, I don't, advocate is not the right word for it, but be a sounding board for that.
Mm,
Because again, we don't talk about it. And
right.
even the whole grief process, we don't teach people how to grieve. We teach kids how to communicate, we teach kids how to problem solve, we teach kids how to do all these things, but we don't teach them how to grieve.
Yeah.
And we don't teach them how to even go through a process like that, because no one wants to do that. No one wants to lose somebody. No one wants to get divorced. No one wants to lose a
Right.
job. There's all kinds of grief, and we don't talk about the processes of that. But absolutely, I do think people step up a lot more than we realize. But again, we just don't ever talk about it.
Yeah.
And so people, and this has shown me too, the isolation aspect. Um,
Mm,
that is something we've had to be so careful about, because
yeah.
obviously in grief, in depression, in sadness, you just want to lay in bed. You just want
Right.
to, you don't want to go anywhere. You don't want to do anything. You don't want to, especially for a long time, we didn't want to go out and have people, because obviously people still treat us different. I mean,
Yeah.
I mean, it just is what it is. And, but so that we had to be very purposeful about that, especially for about the first 6 months, because we knew we couldn't isolate ourselves, because that's when, all kinds of things happen and the devil
Yeah.
wants us isolated.
Right.
And so, um, legitimately, the accident happened on a Monday. We
Mm,
were at church Sunday.
yeah.
And granted, we sat in the sound booth,
Right.
but we were at church.
Yeah.
And thankfully, a lot of it was our child. Like, Jaden, our oldest, he wanted to go. Like, he wanted to
Mm,
go to church. And
yeah.
I'm over here didn't want to get out of the bed, but I'm
Yeah.
like, my child's wanting to go to church after this just happened. We're going to go to church.
Yeah.
And so we didn't allow ourselves to fall into that trap of
Yeah.
doing that. Now, was that easy? Absolutely not.
No. Yeah.
So there were definitely days where I did lay in bed, and
Mhm.
didn't go out and do things. But
Yeah.
more often than not, that was just something that we really had to push ourselves
Yeah.
to do. And I do feel like that was pivotal for our progress.
Yeah. I can relate to that in a sense when it comes to isolation. I struggle personally with really bad depression and anxiety, and um there's times like when I hit like a low, I'm like sitting on the floor just like staring off into space, and my husband's like,
Mhm.
"Okay, like what are we going to do?" He's like, "Do you want to go out and do something?" I'm like, "No, but yes."
Yeah.
Like,
You
no,
need
I don't
to,
want to,
but you
but
don't want to.
yes, I know I should. And
Yeah.
I know that like it will help move me to a
Hmm.
place that's not where I'm at right now in a very physical way. So I can understand that of like it's like a no, but yes, like
Hmm.
no, I don't want to do this, but yes, we're going to do it.
That is
The
so true.
the other piece too, like when you were talking about just kind of the school and everything stepping up, it reminded me. So when I was in high school, my dad left, and my mom was diagnosed with breast cancer all at the same time, and I was kind of like the only person, like the oldest
Hmm.
person at home. So I went into a caregiving, parenting type mode, and when that happened, I think my mom had called the school and just like was like, "Hey, this is what's going on." And again, it didn't get a lot of like it wasn't public that they had these situations, or it wasn't well known, but like the teachers and the administrators that stepped up into my life during that time was huge. And like I will never forget the teachers who were like, "Hey, if you can't turn in an assignment, that's okay. Like that's fine. Or like if you need a moment, just like let me know that you're leaving and leave," and things like that. And it's honestly, it's really comforting and full circle that it's like it's the community that we set ourselves up with, and it's our people that are surrounded by us that really make the difference.
I could not agree more. And that is something, just the last few months, we've actually started a young adult small group with our
Mm,
church. And that's one of the biggest things that I've tried to emphasize with them, because they're young adults. So some of them are in college, some of them are just starting jobs and things like that. And I've tried to reiterate that is so pivotal. Like
yeah.
having that support system, having people who are on your side. And just to give a little more background information, my son that passed away, we had he actually passed away on my husband and my other son's birthday. So they share the same birthday,
Yeah.
and we took our kids and six other kids kayaking. And so six other boys that are my
Mm,
oldest son's age were there to celebrate his birthday, witnessed the entire situation. Um,
yeah.
they were, and that I had a really hard time with that's probably I had a harder time with than a lot of things. And I don't know why, again, people are different, but I was so concerned that like I ruined their lives, that I did
Yeah.
this. And realistically, I know that's not true. I do.
Right.
But that's still one of those things that just pops into your mind, and I'm like, "Oh my gosh, like I have not only have I traumatized my child because of this, but these six other boys are going to have that with them for the rest of their lives."
Yeah.
Um and just the difference of those boys, like there were two of them that like immediately went into like helping the situation, and really trying to help and really trying to be there.
Yeah.
um and a couple of them panicked, and but those boys have been so instrumental with my son, I think, moving
Mm,
on, because
yeah.
he has, and it was a shared experience.
Yeah.
And so even if they graduate college and don't see each other again, they're always going to have that as a connecting point,
Mhm.
which I think is going to help them stay connected
Yeah.
throughout life. And their families were even just absolutely amazing throughout the whole situation. And I mean, some of them we were friends with them beforehand,
Right.
because my kids and everything. But a couple of them we have really, really gotten close to, and
Yeah.
it's been a really good. That has been good again, just because of that community and that support, and having somebody that is truly there for you, and not just, oh, how are you today, and kind of move on, but truly, like, whatever it is that you need, I'll help you. And having that has been, like I said, just great.
Yeah. So when it comes to kind of bring it full circle, when it comes to experiencing this grief and we have our coworkers who, depending on how you work, can be extended family, they can be really close friends, or they can be like nemesis, I guess. I mean, I hope not, but um in those situations where there's an individual going through this really hard time with grief, what is the best thing that like your coworker, say like my coworker is going through this, how could I best respond in your opinion? How could I best respond to what they're going through and support them in the best way?
I think one of the biggest things for me has been people just being mindful.
Mm,
Um, I'm not delusional in the essence of, everyone, has me on their mind all the time. That's
right.
not reality.
Yeah.
So people at work, people at church, people just in general, have said things, or, worded things a certain way that could be triggering.
Mm,
Um, and they don't mean it. Like, that
right.
they're not,
Right.
they're not being ugly, they're not being vindictive, they're not nothing like that. But it's just that we don't think about it.
Mhm.
And when they realize that, many of them have kind of come back and said, like, and I'll just give you an example. So over Christmas, one of my coworkers at the University of Southern, um, we're off for like a month for Christmas. So, we haven't seen each other, and, in the hallway, and they were like, oh, how was Christmas? I'm sure Christmas was great. And, all these, talked about how
Mm,
wonderful Christmas was and all this. And I said, yeah, it was good, and moved on.
mhm.
Because again, I mean, she didn't know me when the accident happened. Like, I knew that
Yeah.
she was not intentionally being like, "Oh, Christmas was so wonderful," and all this
Right.
stuff. Because that was our first Christmas without Jordan. And so
Mhm.
the next day, she came into my office and she was like, "Ashley, I'm so sorry.
Mm,
I did not even think about that. I feel like such a butt. Like, I cannot believe I did that." And I told her, I said, I'm not upset. Like, I
right.
understand that. I said, I
Yeah.
really appreciate you coming, and saying that. I said, but
Yeah.
again, just being mindful of what other people are going through. And I think that
Yeah.
even for someone who's not going through grief, I mean, we never know what someone's carrying with them.
Yeah.
And yes, it's easy to get in our one track mind and do what we need to do, and just kind of live our life, but really being mindful of what other people are going through, and the stress that
Mhm.
they might be under, or the things that could be going on with them. I mean, even if it's someone going through a divorce, or even if it's, I have a friend right now that is going through a divorce, and
Mm.
I do try to be mindful to not, you know, say like, oh, my husband, made coffee for me this morning,
Yeah,
or
like, "Look how
just
amazing he is," or
yeah, like, and so, and again, we're all going to do that because we're not, we don't think that way.
Right.
Um, but like I said, just being mindful, and being considerate. And like I said, I mean,
Mhm.
you're going to say things, like I'm going to say things, that
Yeah.
upset people, or,
Oh, I
you
have
do.
said it. I have put my
Yeah, I
foot
mean,
in
I
it.
will put my foot in my mouth in a heartbeat. Um, but just when you realize that, do be mindful, and just, in my opinion, what is, like I said, I have appreciated is just saying like, hey, I didn't think about it. I do think about you. I am concerned, and just letting them know that they're on their side, like
Yeah.
they are there for them. And like I said, everyone's going to make a mistake. Everyone's going to say something. It just is what it is.
Yeah.
But just again, being mindful of that if you do realize that, and then just kind of identifying that.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I'll tell kind of, I mean, it's a funny story now because the person I said it to laughed it off. He was
Mhm.
not offended or anything, but I put my foot in it trying to be funny. He was saying how um uh, we were just like talking over lunch. It had nothing to do with anything, but his I think it was his mom or his cousin who needed to get a kidney transplant, and his sister had to get a kidney transplant. And tongue in cheek, I went, "Oh, well, I'd get you checked if I were you, like I would,
Yeah.
do something like that." And he was like, "No, it's actually like a genetic condition that like everyone in my family has." And I felt so bad. Luckily he laughed it off, but those situations where you just absolutely put your foot in it, and of course I apologized, and just responding to that moment with grace, and
Hmm.
kind of replying. And I think what I'm hearing from you too is just like in those moments, especially in the workplace, in those moments, just seeing people as human first
Hmm.
is what was coming to mind for me, because that's something that I've had to learn of, just especially with managing people, is usually I'm just like a straight shooter, just go, go, go. And I just remember like anytime I send someone a message and I've like gone and I've typed the whole message and then I just delete it because then I go, "Hey, how was your weekend?" And I treat them human first, and then I jump into the work part of it.
Yes, and that's something that I think even not in the workplace that I know I have to work on, because like you said, I'm a straight shooter. I don't do a lot of fluff, and
Yeah.
so like I just need you to tell me what I need to know or whatever it is and move on. And so I will say going through this has made me much more conscious of that, and
Yeah.
just like you said, treating people as humans first, because we all want to be treated, so we should treat people the way we want them to treat us.
Yeah.
And so again, just being mindful of, and then it goes back to the Bible. Like one of the things I've been studying is the fruits of the spirit, um, because I personally feel like that is just such a hard thing to possess.
Yeah.
And so I've gone through and studied them, and of course, like love is the very first one, and it's, you need to love others and to give them
Yeah.
grace and give them mercy, and just trying to be mindful of that. And to love is an action. It's not just passive.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Well, Ashley, thank you so much for joining us. And I am so excited to read your story and learn a little bit more about grief because, again, I'll admit that's not a topic I know very much about, nor do I want to learn about, which means I should. Um,
I understand.
so one thing that I always like to wrap up with is, what is one discipline or faith-based practice that our audience can implement today to help them move forward in their faith and grow closer to Jesus?
um I think it would have to be intentionally praying.
Mm,
So, and when I say that, I don't just mean like setting aside a time to pray, but a lot of times I find that my Bible reading and my prayer time can become almost like a checklist, like I've done it for the day. And so when I realize that, when God convicts me of that, I try to stop and pray and ask God, help me to use this time to grow closer to you and to be more purposeful and to be more open minded and to truly learn and grow, and not just do it because it's a duty that I need to do as a Christian. Um, and so when I say praying intentionally, even if it's just what it might not, that might not be yours, that might be something else, but just truly asking God to help you and to bring that to your attention. Um, I find that has really helped me to not use it, like I said, as a duty or a check off list, but to
mm,
truly grow, in my relationship with Him.
yeah. I love it. Now, tell us a little bit more about where people can find you, about your book. Hopefully, we'll coordinate the timing so this comes out right around the book. But where can people find you online?
I love that. I'm on Instagram and Facebook as the greenest grass around. The blog is www.thegreenestgrassaround.com. And I'm also beginning to sell some of my materials on Etsy, which is also in that same name.
Oh, I love it. I love it. Ashley, thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate you telling your story and sharing your heart and all that good stuff that came with it. So
Well,
thank you so
I
much.
so appreciate that you asked me, Paige. Thank you.
Thank you. And we'll catch you guys next week on the next episode.